In September of 1954, a 14-year-old boy named Rich shuffled his way down the hallway of a children's hospital in England. Rich was in the hospital because he was suffering from tuberculosis, which is an infectious lung disease. And his condition was still so bad that Rich might need to stay in the hospital for another 2 years. And all this time in hospitals had really impacted Rich's life, in particular in terms of how far behind he had fallen in school. So that day, when Rich walked into the hospital classroom, the instant he saw the teacher for the day, he was really excited because all around the teacher were musical instruments. And Rich, as a kid, had always dreamed of playing the drum. Now it seemed like Rich was finally going to get his chance. And so that day, Rich played the drum, and he and everybody else were objectively terrible. But by the end of the class, Rich had this amazing passion for playing the drum. It was like all he wanted to do now. And he figured that because he was going to be stuck in the hospital for the foreseeable future, he would just spend all of his time on practicing playing the drum. So the following day, Rich went into a closet in the hospital and he found these long sticks that were normally used for knitting, and they became his drumsticks. And for the next year and a half, Rich basically banged these makeshift drumsticks on anything he could to practice. Finally, in 1955, when Rich was 16 years old, he was released from the hospital. He was finally cured from tuberculosis. However, his family was really struggling financially, and so Rich couldn't go back to school. He basically had to get a job in a factory and work full-time just to help support his family. But on Christmas of 1956, Rich's stepfather had secretly saved up all this extra money by working all these extra shifts and doing whatever he could to finally buy Rich his own drum set. And so that Christmas, he gets this drum kit and he began practicing even more. And pretty quickly, he began playing with local bands every time he had time off, and before long he became known as like a guy in town who was like one of the best drummers. And then shortly after that, right as Rich is kind of hitting his stride being this kind of local celebrity, this local very popular band fired their drummer, and so it made perfect sense that they approached Rich and said, "Hey, will you join our band?" And Rich said, "Let's do it." By this point, Rich had become known by his stage name, Ringo Starr, and that band that recruited him was the Beatles.